Hi, my name is Sarah Snow. Today, I'd like to talk about a very important event in my life, a close call with death when I was 29 years old. This experience has changed the way I think about life. Now that I'm 37, I remember that scary time with a mix of awe and reflection. Water hemlock, a poisonous plant that is one of the most dangerous plants in North America, almost killed me. Strangely, despite how well known it is, no one I've met has ever seen this plant. As far as I know, I am one of the few people who have survived its deadly grip. My peripheral nerves went numb during the ordeal, which made me paralyzed and finally caused me to suffocate. What started out as a terrible event turned out to be a deep awakening. It taught me a very important lesson. The more we fight to stay alive, the more we may suffer from the pain of our death. I believe that death is not only an end, but also a way to understand. When we accept life in all its complexity, our physical pain goes down. Things like problems, worries, and pain that come our way are part of this. Some people might think this is a naive or highly idealistic view, but we don't get away from pain. We just change how we see it. This change in how we see things gives us a greater sense of peace as we go through life's lessons. Dealing with death or even sickness and pain can seem like a spiritual lesson meant to wake us up and make us think more deeply about life and love. Our problems have a deep meaning that forces us to wake up from our delusions and live a fuller life. So, I didn't come here today to talk about the specifics of my close call with death. Instead, I want to talk about how it has had a huge effect on how I live my life. The most important thing I've learned is that our time on Earth is a chance to enjoy everything in its entirety. In this way, we get closer to knowing and feeling love in its purest form. From my journey, I've learned that life is full of opportunities to be thankful, whether it brings happiness or sadness. We find a special kind of freedom in being thankful. Before I had my near-death experience, everything in my life seemed to be going well. I had everything a person could want: a job as an insurance expert, a house, a partner, and all the possessions they could want. On the inside, though, I felt a deep void. Even though things seemed to be going well, I was deeply unhappy. Even though I had everything I could want, I still felt like something was off. When I started having health problems, this gap became even more clear. My spiritual immune system seemed to be reacting to a life that didn't feel complete, one that followed set paths without giving me a real sense of meaning or a way to connect with my true self. It felt like I was stuck in a web of societal standards and couldn't get to my true self. This existential problem made me look for answers in ways other than the usual ones. As I started my journey into holistic and alternative medicine, I hoped to find a greater sense of meaning and health. This quest was the start of a big change that helped me see how life is woven together more clearly over time. As I went on my adventures in the woods, I read a lot about herbal medicines. I lived in the northern parts of British Columbia, Canada. The plant medicines there were not hallucinogens, but rather native remedies that had deep roots in the way people there lived. I packed up my things and moved to a small town, where I lived in a trailer that didn't have running water. I spent all of my time there studying plants, having talks with them, and making deep connections with them. I became interested in women's health and tried popular herbs like nettles, which led me to learn more about Angelica root. I found Angelica root growing in the marshes while doing study, and I picked it by hand. Many people don't know this, but this plant has a poisonous twin sister called water hemlock that looks a lot like it. Water hemlock was close, and it made me think that it might have gotten into the Angelica root I had picked. When I took Angelica and hemlock, I passed out and had to stay in the hospital for 4 days. Even though it was scary, I finally came out of it with a stronger sense of awareness. The plant's poison made my peripheral nerve system paralyzed, which caused me to suffocate. When I was out of breath, I remembered a method that felt like the yoga pose Shavasana, lying down and focusing on the breath. It became my focus to slow down my breathing and bring it back to the present moment. This helped me relax deeply. This practice helped me face my fear and resistance to the idea of death and finally accept it. I felt a big change as I focused on my breath. I felt like I was floating above my body and no longer attached to it somehow. From this spot, I could see the nurses working on me and having a hard time finding my tiny veins. I became very aware of what they were doing, right down to the smallest details of how they were doing it. I thought about how, even though we look like we're not aware of our surroundings, we are. This understanding gave me a new way to look at my situation. I felt a deep sense of peace as I left my physical form at that very moment. The substance of my body no longer held me back. It felt like the most comforting presence in the world was holding me in a calm, caring hug. Being in this deep state of calm, I watched the events happen with a mix of separation and closeness. The experience was both peaceful and life-changing. It showed me a new level of existence beyond the body. A deep sense of peace surrounded me as I stepped away from my physical form. What a feeling! I felt like I was one with the world, accepting everything just the way it was. At that moment, I realized how complicated God is and how many sides He has. I fell into a deep, dark, and unknown world because of the experience. It felt like the very essence of nothingness. But this darkness wasn't empty. It was a limitless, happy space. I was immersed in a pure, unadulterated awareness in this deep darkness. At that moment, I felt like I was sitting at the center of reality and taking it all in. A dim white light started to come out of the darkness of this cave. In this space, time was a flexible idea. Everything happened at the same time, and the past, present, and future were all woven together in one moment. It was like this soft light was bathing my soul, and I felt ecstatic stillness. Even though I wasn't in a body anymore, I was surrounded by a light that was so bright it felt like ecstasy. It was an experience of complete peace, deep calm, and endless growth. It's hard to put into words because it was both alive and calm, with no movement or goal and just a huge welcoming space. In this world, I saw the faces of all the people who had ever loved me, those who love me now, and those who will love me in the future. At that moment, all kinds of love came together and poured over me in a flood of huge, transcendent love. I couldn't cross over to the other side because this love pulled me back to my body. It felt like my body had soaked up all the love left on this earthly plane by the time I got to the threshold where the bridge to the next world began. I was led back to my earthly form by a spiritual force. When I woke up, I felt like love was bursting out of every pore. A lot of people talk about feeling heaviness when they come back to their bodies, but I felt a resonant light that seemed to float above this density. I was given a piece of paper even though I couldn't explain my complicated thoughts. I wrote simply, "I love," out of a clear but unknowable urge. In this way, I expressed myself. They didn't just say, "I love you," "I love me," or "I love this thing." They showed love in its simplest form. It felt like I had lost my mind, and the only truth I could share was this basic love. It was a deep understanding that love is at the heart of who I am and what it means to live. So love it is, and my love it is, and it will always be a deep truth. I learned important lessons from my meeting with the divine that are still affecting my life. Even though it's been years, that event still has a big effect on me, as shown by important events like the birth of my daughter a year ago. No matter what, I'm always very thankful for the spirit of love or God that is always around us. When we let go of the limits of the ego's I, we become immersed in a transformative I love, which makes all the options infinite. This shift frees us from the limits our egos put on us and lets us make real relationships. I feel called to share a simple but powerful lesson as I sit here for this interview. Right now is where love lives. You don't have to wait for a faraway time or for death to happen before you can feel love. Having to face our own deaths is a powerful way to remember that we are loved right now. Heaven is not some faraway place that we have to reach. It is already inside our hearts. As much as we care about ourselves, this fact is often hidden from us. When we look at the world through our mind's filter of judgment and division, it seems to go back and forth between good and evil, light and dark, life and death. But there is a deeper truth that lies beneath these opposites. Our bodies are just containers for an all-encompassing, all-knowing, and all-loving essence that is looking for relationship. I believe the key is to go beyond the mind and ego and feel one with everything. This change shows how the outside world reflects how we feel inside. How we feel about love, God, or any other greater idea shows how we're growing and struggling inside. How we see the outside world is a direct reflection of how we feel about love on the inside. We awaken to the truth of our existence through the lessons we learn on this earthly plane, whether we are happy or sad. These problems are not problems to be solved. They are chances to learn more about love and ourselves. What I want to talk about today is how my experience with death changed the way I see things. It showed me that everything happens according to a grand and beautiful plan. It also showed me where I might be avoiding love and forgiveness for myself. Setbacks in life are not only bad luck, they're also chances to love more deeply. We have flaws and times when we question ourselves that remind us that we are temporary and force us to see that death is not an end but a gateway. Once we learn this, we can truly live fully and enjoy the depth and richness of our experiences.